Hi everybody, this is Mark again, and I'd like to introduce you to Melly, my wonderful wife, married for 28 years. And today we'd like to talk to you about Chinese water torture. Not because the two are connected, to be clear, but no, because seriously, there's a clear link between that and Covid-19. Because what both have in common is that they do exert sort of unwanted pressure on the brain. So what we'd like to do today is to share some of our tips that we have around how to basically to cope with the next few months, so that we can almost to turn off the tap a little bit in terms of stress levels. Last year I had a book published called Breakdown and Repair, and it basically told the story of my own breakdown that I had many years ago. And in it, I refer to Chinese water torture, so I want to read you just a short extract from it. The process of a mental breakdown is rather like Chinese water torture. You start off not feeling very much pain. Little things begin to irritate and apply pressure in different places. Drip. Nothing significant, nothing too painful, but persistent nonetheless. Drip, drip. Soldier on, this will pass. Pressure builds bit by bit. Drip, drip, drip. Things become more and more uncomfortable. You now feel trapped and slightly claustrophobic. Drip, 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 drip. More pressure. Is it imagined or is it real? Doesn't matter either way, you feel trapped. Then one day, without warning, the floodgates open. Chinese water torture is an effective method for inflicting maximum suffering because its point of focus is the brain. And that's the danger of Covid-19. So, Melly, back in the day, I mean, obviously things were very tricky for us at home because of my mental state of mind. I mean, how would you compare back then with what we're experiencing now?
Very similar, actually. I was stuck at home and you were stuck at home because you weren't working for 4 months. It was spring and going into summer. We have 3 young children. It's really stressful. No socialising because you didn't want to see anybody. No variety, therefore, and no thought really about or worry about the future. What was going to happen and when was it going to end? So I suppose really similar to now, when people can't see the end of this.
And it felt quite claustrophobic, didn't it, really? We just weren't quite sure right now. People are not quite sure right now how long this is going to last. And I think that lack of certainty just makes it even more stressful for everyone concerned.
So Mark, at the time, I know how it was being with you, but tell us how it felt feeling like you were getting progressively worse day in, day out.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it, because it started off by feeling like a bit like a nagging toothache, and the toothache got just worse and worse, physically and also mentally, because what happens after a while is that you start sleeping less well, you start basically catastrophizing, you start thinking that basically the world's going to end, and I became more and more withdrawn and more detached from everyone, and you kind of feel quite confused and you feel very, very worried. And I think the worst thing of all, you kind of feel that you can't tell anybody about things there. So that was the real thing that I remember most of all, was this sense of nobody must know how I'm feeling.
You didn't communicate with anybody?
No.
Family and nobody?
No, and I wasn't quite sure what to say, to be honest. You know, it was so confusing that you just kept quiet and kept stum. I mean, so Melly, it was really difficult for me, and I was in a lot of pain, but I know how hard it was for you at the time. So what were some of the challenges that you were facing?
I think trying to shield the children as much as possible. They were very young, they didn't understand what was going on, but they had a father who suddenly stopped communicating with them and couldn't do anything with them because he had to be on his own. And I think also just not being able to understand the irrational nature of mental illness. I have never struggled with it, luckily, and I found it very hard to understand and just wanted to say, pull yourself together, which you can't say, and I think I probably did.
No, it wasn't helpful.
No, it wasn't helpful. But I think that's I just didn't understand, didn't get it, and didn't spot the signs probably early enough either.
So what would be your advice now to people who are carers?
Yeah.
In that situation,
to spot the signs early enough, but be vigilant and ask the question if you think they're not fine. Don't just ignore it. Ask them, and if they say I am fine, just ask them again, because if you use your intuition and don't ignore any of the warning signs. If the sense of humour goes, they're a bit snappy, could be a sign of it. So definitely, and learn to speak irrational, which is I'm not very good at, speak in a more emotional way.
Yeah, okay, just maybe the final question for us to consider is that what can we put into place just to stop things from going bad straight away?
Well, I think because everyone's routine has been so upset, I would say structure and discipline. You need to have structure and discipline in your life. Use the exercise allowance that you're able to do. If you're working from home, move to different places in the house. Don't just work from the same place. If you can, change environment. Also eating well, sleeping well, and also communicating. Keep communicating with family and friends through Zoom. You know, you can't physically, but keep communication channels open with everybody.
Yeah, and I think also the critical thing is not to wait 3 or 4 weeks for this to happen, but just do it right now, because the tap is much harder to turn off in 3 or 4 weeks' time than it is now, and mental degradation takes place the longer we leave it. So just act now rather than later. Okay, so in summary, there are probably 3 things that we would like to leave people with. I mean, first of all, as a sufferer, speak up and let it out. It's always much better out than it is in.
Yeah.
Number 2?
As a carer, I'd say be vigilant and intervene early. Ask the question how they are, and ask again if you're not sure that they're being honest.
Okay, I mean, finally, I think the key thing is to make sure that you've got all the bannisters in place. If they're there, the chances are that the tap will stop dripping and you can stop the torture sooner rather than later, so to speak. Okay, on that note, thank you for listening. Be safe, keep sane, and keep on smiling.
Keep smiling.
Okay.